This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogmen, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. How's everybody doing? Good. I was doing a mad scramble for the Enforcer. Yes. Yeah, everybody's asked me. Yes, it's just got water in it for my dogs. They're all pretty good. They're calm, but in case they decide that they want to be like, I don't know, agitated, this like usually it's like, oh my God, she's got the water gun. Yeah. And it's really funny because I'm telling you, everything happens at the last minute. Right before I was ready to go, I have where's my bag? Of wasabi peas. Okay. This bag will last me a long time because I can only handle like a little bit every time. Well, I spilled some of it. And my dogs are going for it. And I'm like, stop. I have no idea. I don't think wasabi, but it was like, and I'm thinking my dogs are going to, if they do, wasabi's going to be too strong for them. But I had to keep them away from them. They're like little piranhas. And I'm looking at them and you guys are acting like if I never feed you. They're little hogs. They're well fed, believe me. And they're going after this like, okay, if it fell from where she's at, it's got to be good. So yeah, I had to do battle with them. Like, leave the wasabi peas alone. Anyway, last week, oh no, see what I mean? They all one bark and everybody wants to join in. It's like, what? He barked? Oh, you know, we did do that. Like I said, I didn't do the live Halloween, but I did put out a Halloween show. Okay, so you can find it. It's everywhere. First, the video and the podcast version. I did it with my wingman. And now, in other words, here's Halloween in the rearview mirror, and I'm going to complain because, as you can tell, I'm just digging in my heels about we're coming to the end of the year, we're going into a new year, and it's like they're like leaving. What happened to Thanksgiving? Everything is Christmas, 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 and it's like, okay, can we enjoy this a little bit? Can we just get to the Thanksgiving part? But the only place that I could say, and even then, it's really part of the holiday setup is like if you go food shopping, they've got all the cranberry sauce and all that. But as far as decorations, minimal Thanksgiving stuff. And it's like, stop it, slow down, let's slow down. Everything is holidays, Christmas, and then of course the end of the year, and then we will be in 2024. And it's like, what happened? I'll go back to my original, my point of reference, which is like, man, the other day was Y2K. The world was coming to an end because computers couldn't handle the 2000 format. And here we are, 24 years later. Obviously, the world didn't end. The economies didn't crash, et cetera, et cetera. So there you go. But yeah, that's I'm still on my rant about, like, God, can we just slow down a little bit and enjoy things for what they are, in that moment? I mean, I'm into preparation. Don't get me wrong, but and I guess this is my thing. When we moved up here from Miami, I got rid of all my decorations, and when I moved up here, I promised myself, you know what, I'm going to buy all new stuff, whether it was for Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and I put all this stuff away. And when you go in there, and there's a gazillion million decorations. I'm like, how often people buy decorations? Usually, these things are good for years, unless you leave them outside. And again, what can I say? It's talk about consumerism at its best or worst, depending on how you look at it. Anyway, let me get off my soapbox. Let's get on to the good part. The good part is who is the guest. And this is the first time this gentleman has been on Stories of the Supernatural. His name is Alan Slonaker. Slonaker. I have to ask him how to pronounce that surname. And he is a native of the city of Richmond. He grew up in a Victorian era home in the city's downtown. It was there that he had his first brushes with the paranormal. Alan was exposed to the city's history and lore at a very early age. That sparked a lifelong interest in history and the paranormal, which ultimately led him to join CPRI, which stands for Center for Paranormal Research and Investigations, in 2007. In joining CPRI, he was thrilled to find a group that approached the study of the paranormal in such an interesting and professional manner. Alan currently serves as the regional director for Central Virginia. He has a bachelor's of science degree in criminal justice from Virginia Commonwealth University with minor courses of study in sociology and urban planning. He spent nearly 30 years involved in the public safety field, including search and rescue, EMS, and law enforcement. Alan has spent the last 20 years as a police officer, having served as a criminal investigator and now as a police trainer. His interests include almost anything involving history, almost anything Star Wars or geeky, and spending as much time on his Harley Davidson as possible. Alan currently lives in the Richmond, Virginia area with his very patient wife, Monica, and his two wonderful children. Help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Alan?
Hey, how are you? Great to
Good.
be here.
I tell you, I was once upon a time a fan of Star Wars, but mm, there's a before and an after, like BCAD. I'm
hmm
not a fan of the latest versions of the Star Wars, whatever saga. It's like, man, forget it.
I did love Rogue One. I loved Rogue
Oh,
One.
it had some highlights, but I was
And I
like,
liked Solo a lot.
oh. I loved Han Solo. I don't know why they did that. Yes, the Han Solo movie was great.
Yeah,
He was great, but they I don't I don't know what they did to those characters. I'm very unhappy. I just don't like. Ugh. I you know having been around when I experienced these movies when they first came out,
same here.
you know, it was like this is you've killed all the interesting characters. I don't know. It's just like I'm not happy. I'm one of those that it swears up and down that what's her face, Kathleen Kennedy, did in Star Wars. I agree with that.
There's
There's a lot of them out
there's
there.
there's some nuggets of truth there.
Okay, all right. So anyway, I had to throw that in there because everybody thinks that only men care about Star Wars. It's like that's not true.
Nah, that's not
That's
true.
not true. There's a lot of fans out there that are like, huh? And Han Solo gets killed off by his own kid. Is like, really? That's how you're gonna, get rid of this poor character? But anyway, I mean, at least have him go out like, no, okay. I could get into the whole, whatever. Like, there's ways to get rid of characters, and then there's ways to get rid of characters. But anyway, mentions in your bio that you were living what as a kid in a haunted house, or something was going on there.
So you were asking about my surname. It's Slonaker.
Slonic. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Um,
I was trying to
but
put the wrong whatever pronunciation. Sloniker. Okay, go ahead.
I know it was a late Victorian house that I grew up
Mm-hmm.
in a neighborhood called Oregon Hill in the city of Richmond, up here in Virginia. It's built in 1898,
Okay.
and my father bought it in 1969,
Okay.
and he bought it from the family that had lived there for two generations,
Okay.
and
Wow.
had actually built the house. And
That's cool.
so my dad passed in '03, and my mother sold it and moved in '04. So
Okay.
in 106 years, two families resided in that home.
That's very rare, by the way.
And um, so growing up there, we had a fair amount of, I guess, what you would call non-interactive type activity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Footsteps, the occasional like vocalization. My dad saw apparitions on a couple occasions,
Really.
um, and it was just, it never bothered him. Um,
Do you think it
when
was mostly residual then, as far as whatever was going on there was doing their thing, and they were? It's not. In other words, it wasn't a real intelligent haunting.
I don't know. I like our organization, we talk about it in terms of interactive versus non-interactive.
Okay.
And I would say it was mostly non-interactive.
Mhm.
Um, but it was, it wasn't scary.
Okay.
It was just, it could be a little creepy. Um,
Right.
but I remember as far back as I have conscious memory, just being interested in this, just kind of curious, fascinated. Um, and my dad was he was an educator for his
Mhm.
whole career. And so he kind of took, he didn't get into all the kind of the woo woo spooky
Right.
kind of, he just took it as this is something that just happens. It is what it is.
Did he ever tell you what it is that he saw?
It was always the same thing. And the time that he told me he had the best look at it, it was a woman in turn of the century clothing,
Mhm.
so early 1900s,
Okay.
um, a long straight skirt. And we had a long hallway because it was a row house and it had kind of like the hallway on the side that ran most of the
Mhm.
length of the house. And my dad's ritual was he'd turn out all the lights downstairs and go up to bed.
Okay.
And he did that and he looked down the hall. Well, there's ambient light that comes through the front door from the street lights outside. And he just looked down and he saw this woman, he said, just kind of gliding down the hall and turned into the front. I get it originally was like a sitting room
Okay.
and turned into there. And he said, I couldn't see her from about her knees down. And she didn't look
Okay.
back and she didn't make any noise. And I said, well, I was a kid. I'm like, oh my God, Dad, what'd you do? He goes, well, I went up and went to bed.
Yeah, I was gonna say
I
I
mean, that was it. That was all there was. So he didn't get really excited about it. It didn't bother him.
well, Richmond is a city with a lot of history.
It is. It is. I mean, going back to before the revolution. Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot of stuff, and I mean, it could have been, who knows, maybe it was there before that house was built, you know? Sometimes you had smaller houses that were built and then they were demolished when, when the bigger, as far
Dad
as bigger houses.
seemed to think that it was one of the former occupants,
Oh,
but
really? Oh, so he had his
um,
suspicions.
but the neighborhood grew up as a like a satellite neighborhood for workers at a place called Tredegar Iron Works, which was a
Ah,
major iron foundry on the James River and ended up being one of the Confederacy's chief armament
okay.
manufacturing sites. But the neighborhood started as workers, mostly German immigrants, that,
Mhm.
that lived up there and then walked down the hill to the ironworks and they'd walk back at the end of the
So
workday.
did the ironworks predate the Civil War period?
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's usually, yeah, people don't realize, when you had to get your workforce to work, there was no auto, not everybody had a horse, and back then, of
yeah.
course, no automobiles, so you made sure they could walk, they could
Hmm.
get there. Yeah.
Hmm.
There's a lot of neighborhoods like that. That's
So,
the origins, in other words.
hmm, hmm, yeah. So, um, again, Richmond has all that history. So I kind of grew up steeped in that. And I loved it. And in fact, one of the things I enjoy most about this, working in the type of research that we do, is getting into some of these historic places and just being able to kind of enjoy them without a
Right.
bunch of crowd around and,
Oh,
and
yeah.
just not even enjoying the paranormal stuff, just enjoying the history of the place. I love that.
Right, because I've told people the best ghost tours that I've gone on are the ones that they give you a historical tour, that the
Hmm.
speaker or the
Hmm.
guide is knowledgeable about the history, and weaves in the ghost story or the go up, but the history is really what's most interesting, as far as when you do that tour.
Yeah.
And no, Richmond, I imagine even prior to the Civil War, I mean, it had stuff was going on there
Oh
as
yeah.
far as a major city in the South.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Um, I mean, you had a lot of the founders coming through Richmond.
Mhm.
Um, Jefferson designed our Capitol,
Wow, I didn't know that.
our state
Mhm.
house. Um, yeah, I mean, we have the second oldest Masonic lodge in the country
Really?
downtown. So as
Yeah,
far as history and architecture, it's and really it's not just Richmond. All of Virginia is just we're really blessed in that
right. It's one
regard.
of the original
So,
colonies, so
hmm
yeah, so the history goes back all the way.
hmm
And people don't realize that all these what are the founding fathers. I mean, yeah, they were there, but they had their own professions. In other words,
hmm hmm Yep.
prior to them, becoming involved, whatever, revolting against the Brits. But
hmm
they were either farmers, gentlemen farmers, or like you said, or architects. I mean, they.
hmm
It wasn't like they were sitting there like, here, not back then. Even if you had money or land, you worked the land along even with the people that you had with you.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
that was that was
And we've been blessed as an organization to have access um, to some really nice historic sites, and to be able to go to these sites uh, sometimes over the course of many years and
right,
conduct ongoing research, which based on how we operate as an organization, we want that repetition, and we want to see that our findings remain consistent over time. So
let
those
me ask you
places make great lab environments.
oh yeah, let me ask you, don't sometimes even the docents or the guides have the best stories because they're there usually either before or after everybody leaves?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, they do, and that's part of the reason that we've ended up in some of these places. We have, uh, I say it's kind of one of our big recurring sites is a property called Bacon's Castle, and is
Okay,
located in Surrey, Virginia.
all
It is
right,
the opposite side of the James River from roughly the Jamestown location. And the building itself was originally constructed in 1665.
okay,
There was a family that lived there prior to that construction, so almost, I mean, shortly after Jamestown. But
right.
this
I was about to
structure,
say that. I was like, wait a minute.
yeah, this structure was built in 1665 and had a major addition done in 1854.
Okay,
It's the oldest brick structure in British North America,
wow.
and it's just a beautiful piece of property, and it's had reports of uh, paranormal
Hmm.
activity, if you will, for 200-300 years.
I would say so.
And of course, that includes things that staff at the building have told us, and they are operated by an organization here called Preservation Virginia, which maintains a lot of the state's major historic properties. And they invited us in over 12 years ago.
That's very
To,
nice of them because I've heard of some groups sometimes that they try to get into historic places like that, but they run into a problem because they don't let them access it after hours.
and I like to think that the reason we got that, and the reason we've maintained that relationship over time, um, is just the nature of how we as an organization operate.
Okay.
And I like to think the level of professionalism that we bring.
Sure.
So that has really helped us. That has helped us forge some good relationships,
Absolutely.
and to ultimately open up some other properties where we can conduct research at. But the thing I think that sets us apart is we view ourselves, and we are a 501c3
Hmm.
nonprofit, educational nonprofit, but we are a scientific research organization.
Right.
We follow the scientific method and the
Exactly.
experimental model. And we're not going in there doing crazy stuff. We're not
Right.
trying to do anything other than be respectful to the property.
Right. And I know where you're going. Sometimes, and I'm sure you've seen in some of the shows that they have that confrontation kind of thing going on. I was like,
Mm.
oh my God, what are you
No, in
doing?
fact, we don't try to engage with anything.
Right.
Um, Virtually everything we do is passive observation and collection of environmental data.
Okay.
And so we're not going in, we're not trying to have conversations. We
Right.
certainly are not trying to provoke anything. We do not utilize anybody that claims to be a sensitive or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. The equipment that we are using, um, by and large, is stuff that you would find in a high school or college level science lab.
Okay.
We're not using quote unquote ghost hunting equipment, if you will.
Right.
Um, the one exception is the EDIs, because those actually do something that's
Okay.
beneficial to how we approach it. It does just collect environmental data. That's it.
Okay.
And most importantly, we're not going to use a piece of equipment that we do not know how it operates. How is
Right.
it constructed? What is it supposed to do? And does it do what it says?
And people don't
Um,
realize that that's very important.
right. And so, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but no REM pods, no ghost
I
boxes, no
agree. I
nothing like
agree.
that. We're just trying to collect environmental data and observe and record, hopefully, things that go on in the house.
Alan, what have you considering, like you said, that you're doing there basically more than anything observation?
Mhm.
What have you found that's really like you say, wow.
The environmental data has been very consistent over time. Um, and so, one of the things that we as an organization set out to do some years back, and it's been fruitful, has
Mm-hmm.
been to see if there is something in the environment that occurs that is measurable,
Okay.
that is simultaneous to an anomalous event. So,
Yes.
for example, if you hear footsteps in the hallway,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, of course, I hear the footsteps
Right.
and I may get an audio recording of the footsteps.
Right.
But what else can we say? What changes? So if we look at it in kind of the standpoint of forensics, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
um, my background's in law enforcement. I just retired after 26 years in law enforcement, so we know that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I made it. Um, the We know that if on a crime scene, if somebody enters into a crime scene, for example, they're
Mm-hmm.
going to leave something, but DNA,
Right.
a hair follicle, something's going to change because you stepped into that crime scene,
Right.
right? So theoretically, that should apply with the paranormal. And so we have found that yes, there are environmental factors that change. Um, so one would be spikes in EMF, with fluctuations in temperature and
Okay.
humidity,
All right.
um, spikes in ionizing radiation, which
Yes.
shifts
I've
along,
witnessed that without that
um,
ionization. I've witnessed it without benefit of equipment. But yeah,
spikes in ionizing radiation that are also, we see shifts in all three axes of magnetic field.
really.
And the interesting thing is like the spikes in ionizing radiation, for example,
Mm-hmm.
those seem to occur with anomalies that are seemingly interactive.
Like what, for example?
When I talk about interactive, I'm saying if something you can't see
Mm-hmm.
turns the latch on a door and
Yes.
opens the door,
Mm-hmm.
we would say that that's interactive because it's acting upon an object.
Okay. And the reason why I say this is, I mean, I was doing paranormal research since the 1990s, and I used to work with a foundation that worked here in Florida, which we did what you're discussing, which is a scientific approach first. And then if, depending on what we found, be quiet, you guys, we would go further with it. And of course, this was prior to all these equipment that came out in the last few years, like you said, the EMAF and this and that. And, you know, there's a bunch of Ovilus and all this other crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And in my experience, when it was basically the most you had was, like I tell everybody, this is when you had to pay to develop film. Like the most you had was a camera
Hmm.
and once you learn your body, my experience, a lot of things, if you know how to feel it in your body, and I'm not talking here psychically, they announce themselves. Something happens that sometimes even your body will pick up on it, that almost like announces that something is going to happen, whether it's a noise or a shift in temperature or something. Not all the time, but I would say a good percentage of the time. And by the way, some of those things, equipment didn't always pick it up.
No, and that's another thing too. The We talk about these as micro events.
Uh-huh.
So if we have environmental sensors out, and we will have a variety of environmental sensors that we will employ: Geiger counters,
Okay.
EMF, temperature, humidity, accelerometers, uh, sensors for magnetic fields, um, and it's just monitoring, just a continuous stream of data. And so
Okay.
you end up with 8 hours worth of stuff, and
That's
you're
what I was going to
looking
ask you. So you guys are spending there like at what, at least 8 hours or 6 hours or
on
something like
average about eight
that? Okay.
hours,
All right.
and so we're looking for you know things that stand out,
Mm-hmm.
and do those things. Um, are they simultaneous to when we heard the footsteps, if you will?
Okay.
But when I say these things are micro events, if the sensor is more than about 3 feet away from whatever the point of origin is, it's not going to detect a change.
Exactly. Yes.
So, so that's why we sometimes end up with as many sensors as we can get, or we say we are going to concentrate in this space or that
Right.
space. There's a spot at Bacon's Castle where we've had a lot of seemingly interactive type activity
Mm-hmm.
on the 1854 side. And that door, which is a heavy wooden 19th century door with a big brass latch on it.
Okay.
And in front of two of our researchers, that latch was thrown and the door was opened.
Okay. That takes a
And
lot of force. That's not like the wind blew hard.
no, no. And so we will concentrate a lot of our data loggers in front of that
Mm-hmm.
door, because another
Okay.
thing that occurred there was we had an electromagnetic pulse that knocked out.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And it occurred in that spot, highly localized. There's no, short of a nuclear explosion, you're not going to generate an
I know. I'm here trying to figure that
electromagnetic
out. Like,
pulse like that.
how did that
And it
happen?
knocked out all the sensors except for the EDI,
Uh-huh.
which is shielded. And we can't explain that. That's occurred once. And our hope is that it's going to occur again.
Let me tell you something.
um,
I've never heard of that.
but that's the kind of thing we get excited about.
Sure.
Is something that is just, this should not happen,
Right. I
but
was
it
gonna say,
has.
when I imagine when it affected all your equipment,
Mhm.
I take it. It's like, you could reason away maybe one piece of equipment doing, you know,
Yeah.
but when you're seeing, I'd be like, oh, okay.
Hmm.
That is incredible. Let me ask you, have you ever had a situation where, like you said, maybe there's a certain room, or in this case, that door, where maybe you've set up the equipment, but for some reason the phenomena seems to follow one of your research team around?
No, if I can go back to the Bacon's Castle thing, the
Hmm.
the frustrating thing is you get like the good sound of the walking footsteps, right?
Right.
And that's something that occurs on the 1665 side all the time. And the frustrating thing is, if it's on the first floor, if you're on the first floor, you hear it on the second floor.
Uh-huh.
If you're on the third floor, you hear it on the first floor. It's
Let me ask you, so when you say what happened eventually, what, they divvied up this structure or what?
it was an addition. The 1854 side was a major
Oh, I say,
addition.
okay, I understand now. In other
Yeah.
words, so, and is there more, because I hate to say it's old doesn't always mean more haunted. Sometimes the newer stuff will have phenomena,
Uh,
even if it's newer.
it's I I can't speak to that. I
Right.
mean, who knows why those things are. Um,
Right.
I will say that the activity on the 1854 side is seemingly interactive, and the
Right.
activity on the 1665 side is seemingly non-interactive,
Right.
which is interesting. And why is that?
Well, one time I had an investigation. This was a residential home, and this was originally this was along the St. Lucie River, which back in the 20s they had a lot of fishing camps there. The original part of the house dated back to then, where people would go there the winter and go
Mhm,
fishing. The phenomena eventually, they made an addition to the house into modern times. The phenomenon was strictly seen on the original structure, which was on the north side of the house. In other words, the way
mhm,
it was, it was really the middle. That side was where all the phenomena. And after a while, you realize nothing
mhm,
happens over here with the additions with the other bedrooms.
mhm,
Everything was on the original part of the house. Which, unless somebody told you, hey, this is there's it's got two time periods, but which led us to believe, okay, this goes back to probably when this was like us. It was like people would put like cabins out by the river.
mhm,
They
mhm.
would go out there, and this is what we were thinking. So
It's we don't really have any idea why.
right.
Why is it that way? Why is it different on one side? Why as opposed to the other? Um, the most, I mean, like you, well, there was an addition prior to 1854 that was
Mm-hmm.
wood, and that was
Okay.
broken down and uh, otherwise reconstructed into what's now a caretaker's house, and has been for a very long time.
Okay.
Um, and there's activity in that, and the activity in that is very different too.
So what did they do? They repurposed the materials, is what you're saying? They
I believe so. I don't want to get
Okay.
too out in front of the history, but
Okay.
that disassembled. I don't know if in whole or in part, but the caretaker's house, which is about 100 yards away,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that has its own activity. Um,
Sure.
you get very pronounced vocalizations over there,
Really?
which you don't have at the main house. Um, so why are these things different? Why do they manifest differently? Why do they manifest at all? Um,
Have
we
you been
don't know.
able to compare it to any of the stories that you've been told by caretakers that it coincides with what they've told you?
A lot of what we have found has been consistent with what staff has told us
Okay.
from their experiences over the years. Staff has seen a lady in white, reportedly, on the 1854 side. None of us have witnessed that
All right.
in 12 years. Um, and in fact, I'll just say this: for people that are interested in this field, visual phenomena is not common.
It is not. It is not.
Um,
It is not.
I can almost count half a dozen times that I've encountered
Mhm.
visual phenomena,
Yes.
and we've had visual phenomena out there two or three times
Yes.
that I can say conclusively we saw something.
Mhm.
And only once did we get something that was, well, no, I take that back. Twice we got something on video, but it's very rare. It's very rare. Most of what you experience is things you hear.
Yes. It's
Um,
almost like it's easier for auditory phenomena to occur than materialization. As a matter of fact, what you described when your dad said when he saw this lady that he couldn't see below the knees, that's very common
mhm.
also, where people sometimes only see the lower part and not the upper body or
And
vice versa.
all the visual phenomena that I've seen
Mhm.
has bbeen nothing like that.
What have you seen?
As a child, I saw a shadow figure.
Oh,
Since
really?
I got into this, the visual phenomena that I have seen has really been limited to balls of light, flashes of light, balls of just jet black. Saw that in one location, um,
Right.
and um, yeah, balls of light and,
Okay.
and
Well,
and and black masses, if you will. I've seen that a couple times.
and it's
Um,
inside or outdoors?
the black stuff was seen inside.
Okay.
Balls of light outside.
Let me
Um,
ask you, when you saw this, I hear 'em, how did you feel? I mean, physically. Did you feel, in other words, how can I tell? I mean, one thing is the reaction to what you saw, or did you experience something physically at the moment you saw it? Like,
I don't think I experienced anything
no,
physically. No.
that's
More
interesting.
of a. I mean, the two black things that I saw were in environments that might have been a little unnerving, if you will. But the the um, the light phenomena,
Right.
like I said, balls of light. There's one at Bacon's Castle that's green. It's probably no bigger around than a golf ball at
Let me
best.
ask you, because I gotta ask you, what were the environments? Because if what was, I can't, in other words, and the reason why I'm asking you is, was it like a regular, were you doing an investigation? Was it something, or were you primed, or how can I say it?
One,
Or was it
uh,
due to special awareness because, maybe like you said, if you're in an uncomfortable situation or location where
mhm,
sometimes you become a little bit more hyper vigilant,
mhm.
you will pick up on stuff that maybe in another setting you might not have seen it or become aware of it.
Are you what phenomena are you referring
You were
to?
the black mass, the ones that you said that they
One
were
was
no.
at a residential, and I'm just going to leave that there.
Okay.
The other one was at a place called St. Albans um,
I've heard of St. Albans.
Sanatorium.
Okay. I was gonna say
It's
I've heard
in
of.
Radford, Virginia. I think every haunted television show
Yeah,
has
I know.
been to
I know
St.
that
Albans
they
at
all
least
go.
once,
They make the circuit of the same places.
and it is a genuinely creepy place. I mean, just even if
It is.
nothing.
I would say it goes without saying, even without investigating, that if you go to a place like a prison, especially these older prisons and these
Mm,
asylums, of course you're going to get, I think, phenomena there because of what took place in its walls repeatedly for years and years. It's like talk about the worst.
well, yeah, and there's another school of thought that and this I'm speaking theoretically here,
Hmm.
but there's another school of thought that says we do this.
In what sense? That we can, as far as witnessing it or feeling it or what?
That you'd have a place like St. Albans,
Hmm.
that is known as this big time,
Right. It's got the haunted
nationally
reputation.
recognized, crazy paranormal environment, and so people go there,
Hmm.
looking for this, wanting this,
Yeah,
and
they're
that
primed.
somehow, one way or another, we ourselves are creating this phenomena within that environment.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a
Um,
bunch of people that do that because they're like, it's like they're kind of disappointed if they don't.
mhm,
And like you said, maybe a regular shadow that's just from the window, all of a sudden it becomes the shadow of the shadow
right.
man. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
but there's some indication that maybe that is happening.
Let me ask you, do
Um,
you think that places like that have, whether you want to call it, there's an imprint of the fabric of the place because of the human emotion? By this, I'm not talking like an active ghost. I say ghost haunting. I'm talking that there is something about that place because of the human emotion that's been lived within those walls for so many years.
I can't say because that's really kind of outside the scope of
Mm-hmm.
how we conduct research.
Right.
Um, you know, is that possible? Maybe. I
Well,
mean, it
the
kind of
reason
kind of
why I
goes
say
back to
this
the
is that normally stuff like that, most equipment will not pick it up. You see what I'm saying? Because let's say you have this equipment, like you said, audio visual equipment or whatever, something that's picking up on magnetic anomalies or temperature shifts. That's
again, the
different.
environmental data has stayed pretty consistent, and things being picked up through environmental sensors has
Hmm.
been very consistent
Okay.
over years now, provided it is within that close enough proximity to the
Right.
anomaly um, for the sensor to register it. Again, if we're talking under 3 feet
Right.
on average, but if you got a room that's 8 by 15 or something,
Right.
and I could be standing on the other side of the room and hear the noise, but if the
Hmm.
sensor's in the wrong position, it's not going to catch it. And
Well, let
why
me
is
ask you:
that? I mean, who
have you
knows?
ever like one of those exactly like what you said? This place that you guys have been there for 12 years,
Hmm.
and maybe you have your equipment, and then, but in other words, you're familiar with it. Have
Yeah.
you ever physically gone into a room that maybe you don't have equipment, but going into that one spot or that one room, you feel like there's something different here in your body?
So feelings are
Well,
not.
when I say feeling, I don't mean as in feeling. I'm saying your body. Your body tells you, how can I tell you? And sometimes, people, there's always that thing about, oh, there's a temperature drop, when there's some type of haunting. I think that sometimes there's, it's not a temperature drop. I'm not talking a temperature drop or something like that. I'm just saying something that when you walk in to a certain space, whether you want to call it on a subconscious
Hmm.
level or something triggers you to like, there's something different about this this area that I've walked into.
So I guess my answer is a little complicated. So
Go ahead.
on one end, you know, 26 years in law enforcement
Hmm.
teaches you your gut likes to tell you something.
Okay.
Pay attention to your gut.
Sure.
But my gut is not data,
Of course not.
right? So what I'm trying to do, what I think all of us are trying to do, is stick with the things that we either can measure with our devices or we
Hmm.
can say, I saw that, I heard that. Feelings start to get, that's it's very subjective. It's not
Sure.
quantifiable.
Sure.
Um, and just to kind of explain a little more, when we go into a place, right,
Right.
we know in advance where we're going to put our equipment. We know in
Right.
advance how many video cameras we're going to run, um, where we're going to position our live audio. And we set all of that up. We usually have a detailed diagram of the property,
Right.
like the structure, and we get out of the building,
Okay.
which is very different again from a lot of what you
So
see
what are
on
you saying? You
television.
guys leave all these things running and you're not there?
So we set up the cameras.
Okay.
We will set up live audio, which is usually a DRO5 that is linked by a cable to our laptop, our primary computer outside. And we will have monitors for our video cameras. And we will set up outside and we will be able to see what's happening in the house. We will be able to listen in real time while also recording in real time
Okay.
to what's happening in the house. We may set up uh, handheld recorders in other places running simultaneously. And then we're outside and we have a logbook. And, every squeak, knock, bang, ping, this,
Right.
that, or the other, we're noting the time. in the
Right.
log and what was heard. And if somebody goes in, so and so and so and so went in at this time, then came out at this time.
S-
Um, and
So in other words, you can account for, like if somebody did something, you say, okay, this happened and it's explained, in other words.
and all of this stuff this will go into a database. It is assigned a case number. All of our video and audio and sensor data goes into our database. Um, it serves as a central repository in RMS for all of our cases.
Okay.
And when I say we also get out of the house, we will go back in
Okay.
to check equipment, if you will. We will go back
Hmm.
in to sometimes just sit and listen.
And you know what? And
Um,
this is and the thing is this, and I admire, because methodology when it comes to something like that is very important. But that has always been the problem with, either if you want to call it the supernatural, the paranormal, that sometimes it's not quantifiable. You can't reproduce it like in a lab, okay, on demand. Like,
no,
I'm sure there's times that you've gone and you've heard things, and you've gone other times and nothing, that you can't replicate it. But that does not mean, and that's why I asked you what you feel,
you can't
because
replicate it like on command, of course,
right,
but you can.
exactly,
But if you're watching the right metrics, if you're doing good observations, if you're keeping good records, and you
right,
have the ability to return to a spot over an extended period
sure.
of time, you will see that that replication occurs on its own.
But and the reason why I get this, because I had this experience as many years as a researcher and investigator. Sometimes the human body, and by this I'm saying somebody that's not primed, somebody that has experience, and especially in your case where you've been there before. In other
Hmm.
words, there's not that, like, I don't know what's around the corner kind of feeling,
Right.
where the body recognizes something
Hmm.
that you, like I said, the equipment might not pick it up, but you yourself feel like, okay, uh, what, there's something here that,
Something puts you at unease.
and
You
whether
know.
it's unease or you feel a shift in something. And like I said, and that's not always that temperature drop that everybody talks about, like, oh, the temperature just dropped. Sometimes it's something that, if that your body and the reason also why I say this, I consider, I'm a subconscious behaviorist. And, like, when you said earlier that after so many years in law enforcement, basically it's your subconscious mind that's feeding
Mm-hmm.
you, tapping you on the shoulder, telling you, hey, you know based on your prior experience, be careful with this.
Hmm.
That there's something in us, I think, as humans. And and I know, of course, you guys are going it from the strictly scientific point of view, but especially after you do this type of work with paranormal research for a while, I want to say, for lack of a better word, you become your own instrument.
I think there's definitely merit to that. Um, we are, despite whatever we're trying to do, human beings at
Hmm.
the end of the day. And like I said, part of being human is having that gut instinct. Um, so yeah, I think there's merit to that, but I think if I was to say anything to other people that are doing
Oh
this kind
no,
of
of
thing, I'd
course you
say
can't say,
be
I
very
felt.
cautious of how much you play into that,
Sure.
because can become a rabbit hole. And so, for example, if wow, I got a headache. I get a headache going into this room, or I feel nauseous going in this room, or something's kind of making me twitchy in this space.
No, that's not
We
good.
we have one of those. We have a guy in our organization who has a really pronounced sensitivity to high level of EMF.
Which will give you a lot of weird symptoms, a lot of weird stuff.
And like headaches,
Uh-huh.
nausea, the whole. So
Yes.
something like that happens. You're like, okay, well, what's generating all this EMF?
Right.
Not what
Yeah.
spooky thing is generating
Mhm.
all this. Like, what is here? Is there an electrical box? Is there poorly insulated wiring? Is there something under this floor? That's the kind of thing. Um,
Right, right, which a lot of
we
people don't realize. A lot of these experiences that people have had is EMF. They're basically suffering from, like you said, there's something going on there and they really believe it. You and you speak to some of these
Mhm,
people that, I mean,
mhm,
depending on the sensitivity of the person, they can have some very weird symptoms,
mhm. Oh yeah,
especially if they live there.
yeah, yeah, and so I agree with you. I think there's something to be said for kind of following your gut, but not to translate your gut into data.
Well, no, of
Yeah,
course, because you're
yeah,
talking strictly data. You
right.
know
And I think you get into and I think you have folks in this field that do that. They go, I felt this,
oh
I
no, let me
thought
tell you
this,
something.
and they treat it as data, and it's not.
Let me tell you something. They've let me pick my words here. They've bastardized this field. I hate to say it or hoard it out or I'm sorry, but for somebody that's been around for as long as like I said that the most you had was a camera and maybe a recorder back then, if that, and not even then. With
Well,
all this stuff, it's become, and the thing is, I hate to say it, like simple observation sometimes or whatever you could capture or it almost became because in that pursuit of the proof, even if that proof was kind of like you see these pictures, hey, do you see that figure behind the window? And it's like, I don't see anything. That's a curtain.
it yeah, and
And
I
I'm
think
sure you know what I'm talking about.
oh yeah, I mean it's a desire for
Oh no, I know that. I know that.
paranormal notoriety over
Yes,
increasing our knowledge base.
sure.
Um, you know, and that's why I said if somebody ever did a television show for us, uh, they'd probably be bored.
Well,
I don't think it's boring at all,
no,
but
but you know
um,
what? A lot of people that watch some of these, and and on my audience going, oh, here she goes again. I tell everybody, for all these people that see these shows, they think, and I
mhm.
go, do you know how many investigations you go that you're like, like
Yeah,
in other
and
words,
exactly. I mean, one, um, you may have a place that like again, I'll use the Bacon's Castle reference that is very active,
right?
um, consistent over time, but you may go in there, some nights and absolutely nothing happens.
No, it's
And
not
you
like
go on
a.
other nights and it's
Let me ask you
um
now that you say it, have you found any type of pattern, either anniversary, weather, time of the
yes.
year? What is it?
Okay. So one thing that and I hope you have a chance at some point to talk to our research coordinator, our director of research now,
Who
Brad
is
Bradley,
okay?
um, who came across this some years back. So
Okay.
NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, has the
Uh-huh.
GOES satellite. They have several GOES satellites. There's one over the Mid Atlantic,
Okay.
and it is in fixed orbit,
Okay.
and it is a solar weather satellite. It measures fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field.
Okay.
So, one thing that we stumbled across was that you can go to NOAA's website and you
Mhm.
can look at all their satellite data all day long, forever, if you're really
Okay.
interested. And you will see that the magnetic field information, you know, goes up and down and up and down. And, it's a graph over
Right.
time. That when that uh, when that activity is on the downward slope,
Okay.
that is when activity is most prevalent. When it bottoms out,
Uh-huh.
it seemingly stops, and it is as it's working its way back up,
Okay.
things are pretty quiet. They will resume to some degree um, once it goes back on that downward slope again. And I, I'm gonna speak to Brad's research a
Let me
little
ask you
bit, but
something. How does it measure it? Hourly or daily or
it's taking samples. I think on the minute.
wow. Okay. Okay.
I think. Don't
All
quote me
right.
on that.
Mhm.
But it's constant throughout the day, And
Okay.
the steeper the downward curve, the more pronounced some of the activity will be.
That is food for thought, let me
And
tell you. That is
well,
food
but
for
it's
thought.
it's showing us that, if somebody goes, well, is the place haunted? Is there a ghost in there? Well, first of all, I can't tell you if a ghost exists, right?
Mhm.
I can't tell you what a ghost is. Okay. I can tell you that there are anomalous events at a given location
Right.
that are consistent with what people refer to as haunting. And I can tell you that there is environmental correlation to these anomalies that has been consistent over years of data collection, terabytes of data collection.
But and this is the
That
thing though. If let's go with a premise, let's go with a haunted. I know you're God, you're Mr. Data. Wow. And then by the way,
I'm
that's
not
not
even the
like
hard science guy.
okay. But let's go on the premise, we'll call it haunted, all right? Because either
Mhm.
because you observed, like you said, consistent, whatever. The thing is this, if it's haunted all the time. It's like, why is it that at certain times it can be measured or seen or felt? Because if there's a ghost there, the ghost is there all the time.
It,
Why is it that
it's
sometimes it could be
it's telling
haunted?
us, for example, like the GOES satellite data,
Hmm.
that there is very
Something that makes it
likely
easier? Is there
some
something in the
sort of environmental
yes.
correlation
Yes.
that we don't understand.
Yes, exactly.
But we're what I think that makes me so happy about our organization
Uh-huh.
is that I think we are I'll toot our own horn. I think we're, really out in front with this in
Sure.
being able to show that, yeah, there's something to this. We don't know what it is. We
Right.
can't tell you that it's a ghost because we can't prove a ghost exists. But these things that people report as hauntings,
Hmm.
there's something going on there because we can actually measure it. And there's some correlation to an environmental factor. We don't understand it yet.
Right.
Um, but that data has been consistent over time.
And the reason also I asked you originally, because I'm sure you've heard of residual and intelligent hauntings. Residual basically is like this thing is whether there's an intelligence or it's just a repetition. I've heard of people that will say, hey, especially in these older houses where, people used to live, once upon a time, people would live like a really long time in their houses, something like what this house that you grew up in,
Hmm.
you know, where they would say, hey, you know what, at 6 in the morning, I would always smell coffee brewing, like, and it was consistent, which is like a residual. It wasn't really a ghost. It's just I want to say it's an imprint on the fabric of something that happened continuously. But there's nothing. It's just, and then some people pick it up, others won't. And then there's others that you say, okay, there's an intelligence behind it. Have you ever had any observations of data that leads you to believe, am I just witnessing a repetition of whatever versus something
Well,
aware of you guys or
again, we look at it in terms of interactive versus non-interactive. Is
okay.
is 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 how we label those things. And again, the interactive is if it's something that it opens the door, it flips the
Mhm.
latch, it
Right.
moves something. um you know
Has
that's
anything ever happened to any of your equipment? I mean, like knocked over or anything disconnected?
we yeah, in the past we've had a couple residentials where equipment was seemingly messed with. But
Oh,
over
you're
the
so
last
cautious. You are so cautious, seemingly. Why? 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 Why?
well,
Why?
but
And the reason why I ask you this is that you sound like the kind of person that goes in there or your team goes in there with your equipment ready to go. You check it, double check it, triple
hmm
check it,
hmm
you know.
and we try to make sure we know who is in a place or
Right,
not.
exactly. Like that nobody's
um
going in there and,
that nobody's sneaking
whatever.
through the back door and things like that.
Sure,
Yeah. um I, Again, I'm cautious, and I think all of us are, of
sure.
saying, it is absolutely this. It is, the late Uncle Fred back from the
But let me ask you
grave.
something, okay? Let
We
me ask
don't.
you something. What would you need to witness for you to say, by this I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying for you, what would need to happen that you would say, "Hey, that was Uncle Fred," or "Holy crap." What would happen? That you actually saw something like
For
you
me
would.
to believe, is
Yeah.
that what you're? I
Yeah.
well, I okay.
And remember,
This is
what
one of
you
those
witness
lengthy
or what
answers.
you see might not mean, because sometimes things happen that you don't have a camera or a
Right.
recorder or something, but something that you yourself see
Yeah.
that you're like,
Um,
hey,
and that too is that's a form of data. If I say, "Hey,
yes.
Brad, Tommy, I went upstairs
Mm-hmm.
and Casper was breakdancing in the hallway and I saw that and I'm pretty sure the camera didn't get it or nothing else got it." We'll log that as an experience.
Okay.
Um,
And
but
that's why
there's
I
no
came down here to
data.
lickety split,
There's
because
huh?
I'm just saying that sometimes it's like, but in other words, you're saying you do take input from your
Yeah,
observations
I
that are
mean, if
not.
I see something and
Mm-hmm.
there's no recording or environmental data well, I mean, we're not throwing that in the trash heap,
Okay.
but it's only going to take you so far because there's nothing else that supports it.
Well,
So then you
how's
start
this?
looking at things in totality. But eyewitness data, I mean, again, I was in law enforcement for 26 years.
Mm-hmm.
Eyewitness data is good, but there are certainly flaws to it.
Well, in your case, let's say, like you just said, that scenario, you're an observer. Your word is probably really good if you came back to your team and said, "I saw this." They're not going to be like, "Nah, you didn't."
No, I
In other
mean, they
words,
would believe me.
right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's like
Uh,
not somebody that came, "Hey, I saw this." If I'm sure that
And
if you
those
said,
kind of things happen, but and you document them. They go
mm-hmm,
into the overall case report,
okay,
but it's something that's not supported by any other corroborating data. So we say, okay, that was a personal experience,
sure, okay,
and it
then
goes
it
into
is
the
what it is.
totality of the data. But the stuff that we're really, that we really want is that stuff
Hmm.
that we can quantify, that we can say we got audio, video, and uh, X, Y, and Z on environmental data.
Right. And the
And
reason
that's
also why I asked you that thing is you're telling me, hey, we're on the third floor and we'll hear the walking on the first
sure.
floor, and vice versa, which tells me whatever is there is somehow aware.
Well, but that's an assumption. We don't know.
Right.
We
Well,
don't
but
know
still.
if there's any intelligence behind those footsteps.
Right.
We can't we can't make that assumption. We're it's it's just an anomalous sound.
Okay. But let me ask you, if it's, for lack of a better word, dodging you guys, okay, where if you're on the first floor, you hear it on the third floor, but then when you're on the third floor,
Mhm.
you hear it downstairs. To me, that indicates that there's something there that is aware of your presence, and basically the phenomenon is occurring, but otherwise, I mean, I've had people that have told me I have heard footsteps come across the living room,
Mhm.
come in through the door. I mean, they don't see anything, but they hear it. And
Right,
it
but
doesn't matter that they were there. They
we're
hear it.
not subscribing any intelligence to it because it's doing that.
Okay.
Um, does that mean that there isn't? No.
Right.
We just can't say. We don't know. And kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, like the whole personal experiences and beliefs
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. Um, you know, we have a pretty diverse group of people in our
Okay.
organization. Now, most of us have, and we try to maintain. If you're looking to join our organization, we're looking for people that have skill sets that are relevant to what we do,
Okay.
not just an interest in the paranormal. So we have people. We have a university dean, we have a
Mm-hmm.
medical doctor, we
Right.
have a computer scientist, we have people with backgrounds in engineering, chemistry, education, law enforcement, um, people that have um, again the skill sets that are relevant to what we're doing, and skill sets like law enforcement. It's not hard science, for example. but it's observational and it's
Sure.
evidence based. Um, so we, you know, okay, I'll give you an example. As a cop,
Mhm.
did I always enforce? Did I have to enforce laws that I personally might have disagreed with? Yeah, you know. Um, you have to have a level of, I think, professional detachment.
Sure.
So we all had we all have different beliefs, experiences, upbringings, religious backgrounds. We have people that are very religious versus people that are not religious at all. People with
Okay.
Christian backgrounds, Jewish backgrounds, non-traditional religious backgrounds. People that believe and don't believe. Onward and onward. And what
Right.
you got to be able to do, just like we have to do in law enforcement, like people have to sometimes do in medicine or many other fields, is you have to take, this is what I believe,
Right.
this is what I think, this is my worldview. I have to box it up, put it to the side, and I
Sure.
have to deal with what's in front of me and
Yeah.
and focus on the data,
It's
focus on
professionalism.
the things that I observe, and not let my personal beliefs uh, um, impact what I'm doing. And so yeah, I mean, they're definitely. I mean, I think I probably believe in some pretty strange stuff,
Well,
uh,
and
but
this is the thing,
but
like
I
you said,
but
you have
I
to.
gotta box it up and I gotta separate that out
And I know what
from
you're
what we're
saying. Okay,
doing.
I gotta unless I can. But like you said, you've got all these backgrounds, all these different types of, as far as whether it's personal or
Mm.
professional backgrounds, belief systems. But it all sounds like you're all looking for one objective, which is to provide proof of the human spirit, or whatever you want to call it,
Well,
the
we
soul.
we're looking. We're not looking for proof of spirits, and we're not looking for proof of afterlife or anything like that. We're looking to prove that that which is referred to as haunting phenomena
Okay.
is actually occurring. Is
Based on
is
or caused by what? That's my thing.
Well, we don't know. I mean,
Because you see what I'm saying? A haunting, like I said, it could be residual. It could have no intelligence. It has nothing to do with the human soul spirit. It's just stuff that got trapped in there, whatever.
we
You want
don't
a
know.
parallel dimension, and every once in a while it bleeds. Oh, who knows?
I
It could be.
mean,
Yeah,
I scientifically I couldn't. I mean, science still doesn't truly understand what constitutes consciousness.
of course not.
Um, you know, so
Yeah, where does
science
our self awareness end?
and
Does it?
science definitely can say that a spirit, for example, um, or the survival of consciousness after the death of the physical body is even a scientific reality. Now, you have University of Virginia
Hmm.
Center for Perceptual Studies, which
Okay.
is all into this and is doing some really really interesting work in a
Okay.
university environment.
Okay.
um, but we the jury's still out. So we're looking to say that that those disembodied footsteps are
Right.
not your imagination. It is a real phenomena. We do not
Right.
yet understand what that phenomena truly is and why it occurs, but that it is, and in fact, a real phenomena.
Right. What's causing it?
And that's
I mean,
that's that's kind of where we're at. That's where we're looking.
well, this is the thing. Obviously, like you said, you've heard it, you've recorded it, I
Mhm,
imagine, right?
mhm.
There's nothing physical causing it. In other
Right.
words, there's nobody walking up there.
Sure.
So, and it's not a noise. In this case, we're talking here the sounds of what actually sounds like somebody stepping.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So then you go, okay, so what could cause the sound or the noise of somebody walking across a floor
Sure.
unmistakably that's being recorded that all of us are
S-
hearing?
So one theory,
Okay.
and it is at best a theory,
Okay.
is that some of the data that is collected
Hmm.
from the seemingly interactive, so that spikes in ionizing radiation with the shifts in magnetic field,
Okay.
is consistent with what the mainstream, the real life scientific community says
Mhm.
we would likely expect to observe at the event horizon of a wormhole, an Einstein Rosen bridge.
That's their explanation for that? Of a phenomena like that?
That is a an idea that that data, that spikes in ionizing radiation, that shift in magnetic field across all three axes,
Mhm.
that and that temperature fluctuation too, because sometimes it may be a little
Let me ask something, why do
go
you
up a
think
little and go down a little. So imagine what we are interpreting as a ghost, quote unquote,
right,
might actually be a sound, for example, that is
alright,
coming through a wormhole.
okay. Now let me ask you, in this let's go with the footsteps.
Hmm.
Why would it express itself that way, as footsteps, as a sound of footsteps?
I don't know.
Have you in, let's say, that vacant castle that you guys have gone continuously, through the years, is there certain rooms where that phenomenon is always, in other words, why would it always be in
The
that one room or that one location?
the hallways, for example,
Okay.
because the 1665 side has um, three long hallways,
Uh-huh.
or two long hallways, and then you have the garret, which was an area for indentured and enslaved over the course of the history of the building.
Okay.
Um, but those two hallways, footsteps are pretty common. Why? I don't. We don't know. I mean, these are some of the conversations that when we're just sitting around
Right.
spitballing amongst ourselves, we have. But again, there's no proof, there's no data at the
Right. And
moment.
the reason why I'm saying is that if you have all these different things that at some moment they basically come together and it's at the right whatever
Mhm.
angle, whatever it is. If
Yeah,
it's going to produce a phenomena, why footsteps of all things? It's like, oh, that's so
I don't
weird.
know. I mean, you go back to that idea of it's a really interesting gentleman, um, and you should definitely try to get him on at some point. John Sable is his
Okay.
name, Sabol,
OL.
um,
Okay.
and he does something called ghost excavations,
Really?
and he has a formal background in both acting and archaeology.
Alrighty then.
Um, and one of his theories, and he's got some stuff to back it up, is that
Okay.
repeated human activity in a given spot for
Yes.
whatever reason through whatever mechanism that remains unknown to us
Hmm.
um, leaves residual images or sounds
Yes.
in the environment through a mechanism that we don't understand. Um,
I totally agree without
and
the way you explained
and
it. I totally agree with that theory.
maybe that is and that and he's gone into some stuff where he has a way to trigger some of the activity based on
Really.
his
Ah,
it is.
that is so
I didn't
interesting.
believe it, but I believe it. I don't know what causes it or why, but
Oh,
it's
see,
quite
that's
curious.
yeah.
Um,
Wow, I gotta get a hold of him. That sounds interesting.
but you're talking about causation,
Well, this is
and
the thing,
we don't know.
the bottom, like whether the footsteps are residual or is it the ghost walking up there in his boots?
We haven't
It's
gotten to causation, and I mean, I hopefully one day we will. I think we're well into correlation.
okay. Well, I was just about to say you guys should have enough data to do correlations
Oh,
as
oh
far
yeah.
as
I think we are solidly, confidently
uh-huh.
within correlation. That there are repeating,
Mm-hmm.
consistent
Yes.
correlation, environmental correlation to this activity.
Yes.
Okay, so what causes it?
Right. That you could say, you know what, we've done this for whatever, 10 years and I
Mhm.
85. I mean, God, that's as as far
And and s-
as a study that let me tell you something, that length of time is phenomenal.
and
But
it's
you
going to
could say
take
this is the common denominator
it's
whenever
going to take
we saw
more
it.
bodies. It's going to
Really?
take more equipment. It's going to take more time. We are a 501(c)(3), so people can donate to us.
Okay.
But I mean, it's really it's going to take a lot more research, and a lot more resources,
Okay.
to get to that causation point. And I think, just speaking for myself,
But you
you
know what?
know,
What if the causation is not always it? How can I tell you? What if there's a variety of causation?
that's entirely possible.
And that's why I asked you, is it have you observed, is there a weather pattern? Is it a certain time
Well,
of year? You
the
know,
GOES, you have the GOES satellite data, which
okay,
I mentioned, which is consistent. That's environmental.
okay.
That's measurable 24/7.
Mhm.
And we got to the point where, we do not even look at the GOES satellite data
Okay, until afterwards?
until well after we
Right,
have concluded a research project for a given day, because
right,
we do not want to contaminate our data.
right,
Okay. So we will look at it after the fact and see, does anything correspond? And over time, it does.
right.
Um,
And
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 it's
and
pretty
that's the
consistent.
thing that, when you look at because, you hear of things like some certain events take are anniversary driven or seasonal. You'll have places that'll say, in the summer it's dead here, but then in winter we have some phenomena going on.
Well,
And then it makes you think, okay, if there's something intelligent here or not intelligent, why would it be aware of the season?
how much of a factor does geology play?
Absolutely.
And
Quartz,
and
depending if
and
you've got any water running through it, if you've
and
got any
that's anecdotal, but I don't. There's been no. We haven't done any research into that. Um, but I can tell you anecdotally, the
Mhm.
places with large quantities of quartz do
Yes.
have some strangeness.
Yes.
And why is that? But I guess
Well, yeah, you could say, yeah, found the correlation as to why quartz. Is it the mineral properties? What is it? What is
again,
it? Is it a conductor?
it's anecdotal. Yes, it is.
Mhm.
But it's anecdotal. We don't have any significant research of any kind on that I'm aware of. Um, but again, you're seeing all these things are
Let me
showing
ask you, do you guys
us.
have you and I don't know, you might not discount this because you just have you guys done any correlations with ley lines to any of the
No, we
places
have
where you've
not.
been at? Okay.
We have not. Um, the um, we're seeing all this stuff that, something's happening. There's something I feel confident in saying is it's valid. Which, I while we tend to provide some kind of cagey answers, I guess, if you can say, well, I can't say it's that, I can't say it's
You
this,
know
I
who you're
can't say,
starting to remind
you
me
know
of? You know who
what?
you're starting to remind
Oh
me
my God,
Oh my god, what's his name? Paul Politis with his missing 411 that he put for the love of Mike would never say what he really thought it was. I don't know if you've ever
I'm
heard of him.
actually fascinated with his
I
work.
know it's great,
Um,
but if if you hear him through the years, different interviews,
but Paul was a
they'll
cop.
try to interview him so he'll say what he thinks it is. He
Paul Pilates was a police officer,
Yeah, I know, out in California.
and
San
we
Jose, I
just
think.
we're going to tell you what we know,
I know that.
and
I
we
know.
will tell you what we think might be. But I think that's a problem, and this is where I'm going to editorialize. I think
Okay.
that's a problem in the paranormal field.
Mhm.
Um, and I have a 10-year-old son, and my 10-year-old son, loves like the Travel Channel,
Yes.
paranormal shows,
Sure.
like Paranormal Caught on Camera and stuff like
Yeah, I
that.
know. I see.
And he finds it entertaining, but I sit there
Sure.
and watch some of that stuff with him and go, "All right,
Oh,
son, okay,
oh.
son." But you have these people. and I'm like, how do I get this job? I'm retired now. I need a new gig. And how do I get this job where I can be a paranormal expert? And they put the little words
Yes,
under my face
exactly.
on TV, and they go, well, it's definitively this. It's
Oh,
because
no, I know, I know.
ghosts like this and ghosts do this and go and I'm like, how the hell do you know?
No, I know. But it's entertainment. It's not
And
really
exactly,
research.
but that's the thing. I think you have people, may have an interest in this, but don't necessarily have a understanding of data or research or the experimental model, evidence based
No, they're
approach,
not. They're not.
or just
That's
they're taking this as gospel,
of course.
and so we tell people there's a lot that we don't know. Here's what we do, and that's exciting, and this is
Let me ask
really
you, have
interesting.
you ever had the caretakers at any of these locations, especially like this Bacon Castle, who have afterwards said, every time you guys visit, we see an uptick of activity? Have they ever disclosed that to you before or after an investigation?
No, not an uptick.
No?
No. Mm-mm.
Something where they say, hey, you guys, when you guys come here, stuff happens after post investigation.
No, no.
No?
We have seen, and we've had made some observations of places that, um, there's a historic property near us that has long had a reputation for like haunting phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been your pretty run of the mill stuff. Your basic southern haunted house stuff.
Right.
Nothing very scary or pronounced or crazy or anything like that. And over the last few years, it's become a focal point for a number of paranormal tourism type events. A couple different groups that are
Yeah.
doing their what they do there, um, and we've seen some of these places get a lot of people. And I talked a little bit about this earlier, but a lot of people coming in to do the ghost thing and
Mm-hmm.
expecting haunt, and so the phenomena within the building changes how it manifests.
Sure.
Um, Something that might be more mundane starts to become more pronounced.
Yeah.
Something that was more non-interactive starts to become more interactive. It may even become, for lack of a better term, more hostile or
Oh, let's go with it. Malevolent?
well,
No, no, oh my God. Oh
I'm
my
luck.
God. Ah, I
It's
knew it. I knew
very
it. I knew I
different.
was gonna say that. You were like, I knew it. I knew I was
It's
gonna say that word. You were gonna be like, no, 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 no,
no,
no,
but it's
no.
it's different, and then we get to like,
No, come
so
on.
is
You know
that
what that is?
something?
That is. There is.
But
There's
is that
one
something
thing.
we're doing? Is
No,
that
but listen to.
us?
Oh, okay. But and the reason why I say this is, some because if you think about it, if something's there, let's go on whatever, whether let's go on the premise that there is something there. And like you said, there's people visiting there and they're obviously looking. So you're saying that basically they're how's this? Do you think that when people report what you in a hostile reaction, it's their imagination or something reacting because now you've got a bunch of people tramping through there trying to communicate with whatever's there if something's there?
I
Because if
don't
nothing's
know.
there, nothing's there.
I don't know. I can just tell you that we've observed, and it's something that warrants some additional study.
Okay.
But that activity, the nature of how anomalies present,
Okay. There's
shifts.
I'm sure you're familiar with Skinwalker Ranch. Every who's not familiar with Skinwalker
I
Ranch.
would give my right arm to go spend a month at
Okay.
Skinwalker Ranch.
You know that before Fugal took it over, that it was under Bigelow's
Hmm.
ownership.
Hmm.
From what I understand, at the end, this was around remember, they had already been years running around there
Hmm.
trying to capture evidence, and
Hmm.
it kind of tapered off. And they just stopped everything because they thought, in a way, that the phenomena had receded because there was so much observation and people running around and things like that. Okay. And the flip side of that is, which it's almost like, what did the whatever was going on there, whatever it is, leave or recede? But then you hear, they wrote another book. What was the guy?
Skinwalkers at the Pentagon.
No, that's only Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. The other one with Colm, that he talks about
Well,
people.
there's I got it on
Okay,
my shelf.
okay, Marlene. Anyway, that he that
The Hunt
basically,
for the Skinwalker. I had to look at my bookshelf.
yes, that the people that worked, not necessarily the team that was doing the actual, any personnel that was on those grounds at some point basically took what they called hitchhikers home. All right.
Yeah.
And they experienced stuff at their house. People that when I say, from what I understand, security personnel, stuff to the point that some of them said thanks, but no thanks. I'm not going back. And and it makes you wonder. Okay, are you, are all of these people imagining it?
No, I don't think they are.
What do you think? Uh,
I don't know. I think I I think that the discussions that have been had by like folks like Travis Taylor
mm-hmm,
um, over the last couple of years, talking about an Einstein Rosen bridge and the whole wormhole thing,
mm-hmm.
uh, probably got some merit. I personally think they probably have some merit. I say I am not a scientist, nor am I a scientist on par with Travis Taylor.
Right.
But I think there's probably some validity to that. And there's also another school of thought that says, that there are places like Skinwalker Ranch that have, for whatever reason, whatever environmental factor, have a much higher propensity for strangeness.
Okay.
Um, you like uh, Mike Pleiades, the missing 411. I mean,
Yes.
he's kind of touching on that too with his stuff.
Right.
Um, the high strangeness, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we're not dealing with that. I would love for us to be able to deal with that.
Well,
I would love for our team to be able to go spend a month at Skinwalker Ranch and do what we do out there. But there's a school of thought that, maybe all this stuff, UFOs, hauntings, even cryptid report, these things are all products of the same source.
it could be.
And, who knows?
Well, I mean, when you look at Travis Taylor, when I saw the show originally, when he went there, you could tell he was he was totally like science, science, science. And he had looked at and you could tell, and a lot of things started happening that he could not explain. He
Yeah,
just
except he was
couldn't.
working for the government when he did, when he was out there.
Well, you know, you could tell some of his stuff was he couldn't. It sounds like, or that their experimentation, they were trying to find
Yeah.
like proof, like, okay, this is caused by XYZ or whatever.
And it's television, and I don't know how their
Let me
editing
ask you, do you
process and
think?
all that works, but they are actually trying to use science, I think. So,
I mean, I have gone that back personally, and I have researched, newspaper reporting back in the 40s and 50s of
mhm,
UFO phenomena in
mhm.
that area prior to,
It's a long history of stuff there. Yeah.
that people were observing, and oh my
I
God,
think
what was the guy's
it's
name?
absolutely fascinating. It's probably far and away number one on my um dream list of places to go.
And I guess my thing is that if a phenomena is occurring and it's occurring there, it's occurring. It's like there, whatever. But what gets to me is when you start seeing that whatever's there, whatever the source is,
Hmm.
there is some intelligence, because if it's following you home or you're experiencing this, okay, this is not something that's just if you're there, you're there. And no,
Yeah.
in other words, there's some type of awareness of you and what you're doing here. And
But
even
again,
when you look,
we have to be careful how much we ascribe to the phenomena.
well, I mean, at the end of the day, basically, these are people recounting their
Yeah,
experiences.
no, I agree, and that I think that that hitchhiker effect is probably valid, but like in the types of stuff we're doing, for example,
Mhm.
we have to be we say seemingly interactive, seemingly non-interactive. You know, something can be interactive and not necessarily be sentient, for example.
Okay. But and if you go by like some of the things that they've described,
Oh yeah, oh
it's
yeah.
like it's like how
There's
can I tell
some.
you? It's not only strictly a grays, with the big eyes. They've
Oh, there
described
is some. I've followed that property a lot. I've
right,
read the book, and I find it absolutely 100% unbelievably fascinating.
right.
Um, but even somebody like Travis Taylor will tell you, they don't know what the hell they're dealing
Oh
with
no, they're
out
not.
there.
And that I think that's why they can't like they can't, even despite I haven't seen this last season, but it seemed like every time they were trying to do
And
something,
in, and he will say, this is seemingly interactive, you
right,
know, um, and seemingly intelligent. Um, it's responding to some sort of stimuli, you know.
right.
Um, but again, who the hell knows what they're dealing with?
Good
I
question,
mean,
huh?
and yeah. So um, it just tells us that there's a lot of strange stuff out there,
I mean, I've got to
and
ask you this. I've got to ask you this, Alan. Have you ever seen a UFO?
no, again, I would love to.
Okay.
I would love to. I would absolutely love to.
Uh huh.
I would love to see one before I go take that long dirt nap.
Uh huh.
I want to see one.
I've never seen one,
Um,
and I live close to the Ocala National Forest, which has got stories gazillion. It's like stop
yeah.
UFO hotspot, and it's like I never had that event. Not even the
I
lights.
mean, I've seen a floating ball of light and a floating ball of light that moved. I don't put that in. I mean, I guess, was it flying? Was it unidentified? Yes, but I that was in the context of more of the haunting type stuff.
Okay.
So
Well,
um,
there's a lot of stories about those floating lights that when people try to catch them, they recede. You can't ever catch them, and
I
they're
want to
seen at
see
certain
the
spots.
structured craft. That's what I want to see. I want to see the structured nuts and bolts craft.
Oh,
That's what I want to see.
so do you think if let me quantify this for you, qualify this for you. If there's uh extraterrestrials, do you think they're hostile or friendly or indifferent?
All of the above.
Oh,
Well, it's a giant universe.
okay. The ones that are around here. So you're saying basically there's more than one, or they
It's
just
a
feel differently
big.
about
It's a
us?
it's a big universe. It's a
Of
big
course it is.
universe, which means that the possibilities are endless, and the likelihood of finding all of the above are are are
Oh
there.
no. The thing is that
Uh,
are they here? Do you think so? Obviously, what
do
you
I
think
think
they're
they're
here?
here?
Yeah,
Personally, speaking for myself as an individual,
yeah.
I think yeah. I think we have been visited by some non-human intelligence,
Okay.
um, wherever that intelligence may be from. And if you listen to certain people that are, prominent in this field right now, like um, Luis Elizondo,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know, and he's still very cagey because he's wrapped up in a lot
Elizondo, I'm
of
like,
NDAs, and
not
he I think you have to listen to what he says, and he talks about think bigger, like think bigger. So are these things from another planet or from somewhere else?
well, they could be
Or are they
intra or interdimensional also.
non? That's why they say, a lot of those folks are talking about it in terms of non-human intelligence. They're not saying extraterrestrials. They're just saying
Yeah, of
non-human
course.
intelligence. And so that means it could come from a lot of places. But yeah, we as an organization do not get into that thing, but I have a personal interest in that.
Hmm.
Some of our membership does. And I've been following the news cycle on the UAP front with great excitement over the last 4 or 5 years.
Let
So
me
I
ask you,
think this.
what do you think that these, after decades and decades of saying that it was weather balloons, what do you think these congressional hearings, does it mean they're taking it seriously or what?
Time will tell.
I don't know. See, that's because after you see, you read all these stories, you become like a cynic. Like, okay, what's up? You guys been before everybody
Uh,
that popped their head up saying that they
t-
witnessed.
time will tell.
It's
Um,
like,
but there's a lot of incentive for governments, plural,
yes.
um, not to come clean, or at least fully clean on the issue.
Well, I think. What do
But
you think? But well, people, makes you think. Okay, what are people going to get upset? Like you knew this all this time,
no,
or
it's amazing how many people are absolutely not following it or completely disinterested in it. Um, and those of us that are interested in that phenomena, um, the news cycle over the last 4 or 5 years has been really, really interesting.
yeah. Well,
I
let's
couldn't
face it.
investigate the UAP phenomena though, and one of our members many years ago was a member of MUFON,
Hmm.
and he's fascinated with it too, and he's like, I had to get out of it, and I said, well, why? He goes, well, you somebody calls and they say, I saw this
Right.
and it did that, and you go and drive out there and you basically take a report. And she's like, it's almost impossible to investigate because you never know. It's not repeating. You never.
Hmm.
It's completely unpredictable. It just,
Right.
you almost have to be magically in the right spot at the right
Oh, but the
time.
best you could do is take their down their story, whatever
Right.
it
And
is.
he said it just, he said like I had to get out of it because I didn't feel like I was moving the ball forward in any way.
All he was doing was recording experiences.
Yeah, and he had people that would come to him, and some with some extraordinary
Hmm.
stories, particularly extraordinary stories that tied back to the government. He's like, well, that's absolutely fascinating, and there is absolutely no way I can corroborate what you just told me.
Right.
And it's a very interesting story, but again, that's as far as it goes
And
because
people will
there's
tell you, and there's a lot of people that say, well, how many of these UFOs were not really alien in origin? They're our,
uh,
advanced whatever.
I don't know.
And,
I, I
people
I
see it and they're like, what the hell is
I
that?
think there's a percentage that is that, but I don't think it's that much.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, it's like what's there, what's not.
I don't know.
And eh, I'll tell you one last story before we. I interviewed a while back. This gentleman's passed on since then. This gentleman, he was running a Bigfoot society out of Alabama since the
Mhm.
1970s. Okay. And he would tell me, he lived out in like a rural part of Alabama. And he told me, Marlene, it got to the point where people would see things either crossing the road and things like that.
Mhm.
They would call the police. You're right.
Mhm.
Police would get there and they're like, what do you want us to do? So he
Yeah.
says that he would end up, some of these people would, he would end up, they would take him to his house if they were close by. And they say, hey, tell him this story, this man. And he told me, he says, Marlene, you know what? I can't say what these people saw, but they believed, in other
Yeah.
words,
Yeah.
they really believed that they had seen Bigfoot or something that scared them. And he says, and I had a couple that even told me, you know, can we stay here until daylight? I mean, he says
Mhm.
they were not faking it. They were not making up a story
Mhm.
to the
Oh, and I'll say again. I mean, I think there's a lot of strange stuff out there,
yeah.
and I think there's a lot of validity to what gets reported as strange stuff. But we kind of, as a society, with our sometimes our lack of critical thinking and our pop
Mhm.
culture and all that have really sensationalized so much of this
Of course.
and transformed it into entertainment,
Sure.
um, more so than skeptical inquiry,
Okay.
and that the waters are really muddied, um,
Well, you know
and
what? But
and you
if you
got to
look at
sort through a lot of it.
but you know what? Even let's say we'll go to the ghost thing. Even before, let's say that we could say, well, this last 20 years where they've had all these reality shows having to do with the paranormal. Back then, at the beginning, there was, especially post Civil War, there was the spiritualism thing
Mhm.
where, it was that version of, I mean, obviously they didn't call it entertainment, but,
Well, but it was. I mean, it was treated as a as a
yeah,
parlor game,
yeah. And you had
and
people, and of course, a lot of people driven by grief, that's usually who
right,
like,
and I think we need to look at these phenomena, whether we're talking about haunting type stuff or the UFO type stuff. You know, something's going on, and we need to approach it with science and reason and you know open minds and really look to get facts and data.
of course.
And I think that sometimes gets lost in a lot of the hype.
Um, but there's something also, Alan, which is, and I understand what you're talking about as far as gathering something that can be reported. But sometimes you could have your own personal experience
Sure,
that will make
sure,
you a believer. And you could say, you know what? I could never reproduce this. I could never
sure.
make anybody believe that what I saw. But
No, I
especially
think
if you're
I
one
think
of these
that's
people
true.
that it's like, hey, I've discounted every reasonable explanation that was what I saw.
Hmm.
Okay. And I know that that's what I saw. And, you're a believer and you could, like you said, you set that aside when you're doing your investigation. But I think there's also something that shifts in you because you witnessed it firsthand.
I
And
think
unless you're
that's
delusional,
I don't. I think that's very true. Where what I'm referring to is showing the validity of this to society at large.
oh,
You
there's
know,
always
not
that's a you know what? That's because of the nature of what you're trying to do, that's very difficult.
and being able not on the individual level. Yeah, I think what you're talking about
Hmm.
has merit. But being able for society to go, this phenomena is real. Maybe we don't understand what it is or how it happens, but it's real.
Right.
Um, that kind of thing is exciting.
Sure. But then
That's
you're going to have,
interesting.
if you prove that there's, let's say, well, I'm going to go with the theory of, the soul persists, you're going to have a lot of atheists are going to be very upset.
No, maybe I don't know. I
The ones that are like, okay, you mean it's not over when it's over? It's like, no, apparently there's something
but
that's
you talk to some of them, and they believe that consciousness survives. They just don't believe in heaven or religion or that kind of thing. But
so what do you do?
some of them,
So
I don't know.
I
I
think
don't
that
know.
sounds kind of boring, like, or an agnostic, or an unacknowledged agnostic that calls himself an atheist.
It it
I'd
it's
I'd rather go with the pearly gate version, to be honest with you. I'd be like, you mean that's it? And then I'm gonna
it's
be what, wandering around looking at people living?
yeah. It's funny that I've been doing this now for what, coming up on 17 years,
Okay,
and I probably have more questions than when I started,
sure. That's
and
innate. Everything.
and I I don't feel as definitive about I'm just there's a whole lot going on, and I'm just not sure that I knew what I thought I knew.
Well,
you know,
that's
so
usually the way it works. Is that how's this? Sometimes that's what happens. Like, when you open one door, then others open
Mhm,
up. And it's not till you open that first door
mhm,
and then you go through, then you realize, man, or like you said, a rabbit hole is like,
mhm.
this rabbit hole is really, really deep.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, and once you're hooked, you're hooked.
Mhm.
you know.
Again, I think there's plenty of evidence to show that there's something going on, and hopefully, the we as a society become open-minded and curious enough that mainstream science, and there are definitely mainstream people in mainstream science that don't take this position, but that mainstream science goes, we really want to look into this a lot. We really want to explore this a lot, and we're going to start funneling university dollars, en masse into this type of research because we want to know what's going on. That would be wonderful.
But you know what? I think that this line that line blurs between scientific and non-scientific just because we're talking observation of what? Um that like you said, and I hate to say it, but a lot of these academics, they have big egos,
Mm,
you know,
yeah,
and
but I mean, we have a professor, a
uh-huh.
dean on our as our vice president, our organization's vice president, and he's one of the most intelligent and just genuinely curious people that you ever want to meet.
Okay.
Who doesn't who really sits there and thinks about things and doesn't just offhandedly dismiss, you know. And I think there's a lot of those people out there.
Sure. I know
I'd
there's a
want
lot of people
more.
that would like unless they've actually had their firsthand experience that want that because let's face it, I don't care what anybody says, nobody, even the atheist, nobody wants to be thinking that that's the end of it.
No,
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 really. I mean, we're all that's the nature of the human
yeah.
condition. Nobody wants to really believe. You mean that when I die, that's it? That's it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Lights out.
lights out. You mean that's the end of all everything I went through? Yeah, that's it. It's
No,
over.
again, I think there's a lot more out there, and science is really just kind of scratching the surface. So,
I
and
know there's
we're
a
over
lot.
here in our corner, kind of trying to do our part.
Like,
So,
of course, that is we're the only animals that explore.
hmm,
Humans are the explorers, whether
hmm,
it's physical exploration or in this case scientific
yeah.
exploration. That's us humans. Alan, for my podcast listeners, Alan, where can they find you at? What work you're doing?
So they can find us. Our website is centerpri.org. They can
Okay,
also find us on Facebook, Center for Paranormal Research and Investigation, CPRI.
okay,
We stay pretty active on Facebook, and they can also find us on Twitter as well.
okay,
I'm not sure how
okay,
much tweeting we're doing. I don't
okay,
handle that aspect of it, but Facebook is a great way to find us.
okay. Yeah, it's like, sorry, Elon. Everybody still calls it Twitter. It's not X. I don't care what you
Yeah,
call
Twitter, X.
it. I know. To me, it's like, what a
I
waste
don't
of
care what you
time,
call it.
man.
I'm
Yeah.
personally not on it.
You tell somebody X and they look at you like going, what?
Yeah.
Twitter. Oh, Twitter. Okay. It's like,
Yeah, yeah. So they please check us out. We do try to stay current and with sharing things that we're doing,
let me ask you,
things
do you
that we
guys ever
found.
do presentations for,
We do. That is as a 501c3 nonprofit, we chartered ourselves as an educational organization.
okay,
So part of fulfilling our educational mission is doing things from this podcast
mm-hmm,
to doing presentations um, at various locations. One of the things that we have done is like Bacon's Castle, and I come back to that because that's
right,
just such a spot we have so much involvement with. Um, is twice a year, the second and last weekends of
okay,
October to
okay,
coincide with Halloween, of course.
yes,
They do historical tours there,
okay,
and we come in and we set up all of our equipment, lay out everything as if it was a normal research project there,
yeah,
and they people coming in get the history of the building, but they also get um, a healthy dose of what we do and how we do it, what makes us different from a lot of what's out there. Um, so that is that's part of our mission is not just to show people what we do, but explain them kind of our approach,
Sure.
and
Exactly.
that we're coming at it from that scientific perspective, the experimental design perspective, critical, but open minded.
Exactly. Absolutely. I'm going to put a link to your your website on the credits of the show, but it has been an
Please,
absolute pleasure to speak to you,
thank you
Alan.
so much.
I've
Thank
enjoyed it.
you.
You're great,
Thank
you know,
thank you.
and I will be staying in touch with you, and I'll be following up also on your recommendations for guests, most definitely.
Yeah, please. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye bye. Hey. Okay. So here we go. See, for all those people that think, oh man, all you ghost hunters, you're ready to believe. You're ready to believe anything. No, we're not. And I've said it before. For people that always want to say that, okay, let me qualify this. Real, real ghost hunters, researchers, whatever you want to call them, paranormal researchers, the real ones, not the ones that are into the sensationalism. We have, I don't want to talk for myself. I have a higher standard to accept something as paranormal than, than somebody who doesn't. In other words, I agree with most of the things that Alan was talking about. Unless you can show me, like I said, a picture. I've seen people show, though, that the orb. It's like, God, the orb really, I hate to say it, but an orb thing is kind of like, hey, did you see that figure, that shadow behind the wall, behind the window? And to me, I look at it and it's like, all I see basically is reflection off a piece of glass and maybe a curtain. So unless something is really, um, for lack of a better word, in your face, it's like, and, and nowadays, I hate to say it, but there it is. Photographs can be doctored now, and you don't have to be that expert to do it. Um, Same thing with audio recordings. I mean, I believe in it. You know why? Because I have had my own personal experiences with it. They're not common, but I have stuff that I know. You know what? And this is the thing. Whenever you go on an investigation, whether you want to call it a scientific investigation or whatever, but the groups I've worked with throughout the years, they've always gone in there presuming that they're going to try to explain it through natural phenomena. This thing of going in there like, oh, absolutely, this place is haunted. And by the way, sometimes you will speak to people or person, whoever's there, that will tell you stories that you're like, wow, but again, you'd be surprised some of the things that people will construe as a ghost or something when it's not. It's not. Uh, like he said, EMF will make you feel, even in some cases, extreme cases, hallucinate, depending on where you're being affected by that EMF, where people will swear up and down that they're like going crazy, but they'll say, I saw this, I felt that, I saw this. And it's basically they're being affected by EMF, um, which is an EMF is electromagnetic field. Um, Other times sometimes people, I hate to say it, people are, if they come from a family of origin that was very much into believing in the supernatural, even if they're grown up, it somehow this lack it raises its head where even if you're an adult, all of a sudden you become a believer because you have that in your background. Instead of looking at, this could have a very un unspooky origin, so it could be anything. Um, so again, the good paranormal researchers are not going to go with the first whatever, even with the interviews that they get from the clients, what they've been told, or even if the place has a history of, oh, that place is haunted. It's like, unless I can observe it, or in his case, because obviously they go out of their way to qu- be able to capture. And this is the thing. See, they're capturing phenomena and they're capturing data. They just don't know what the origin is. And that's where the thing comes in. It's like, unless you have to go say, oh, but yeah, by the way, that was me walking upstairs in the hallway. That's me. How are you ever going to, yeah, you could say there's correlations, whether the electromagnetic field of the EMF or the weather or the quartz or we found that if all these things are aligned, there's more likelihood that we're going to get that phenomena to occur. Okay. All right. But what is it that's causing it? Why is it manifesting like that with human footsteps? Okay. Why that? And that's where the problem comes in, because sometimes, I hate to say it for lack of a better word, you might never get an answer. You might never get an answer, because whether you're talking because it's another dimension, or whether you're talking a spiritual world, if you want to call it another dimension, but let's go with the spirit world. Okay. Um, that for some reason, that existence, that plane of existence, you can't apply the laws of science or observation to it. That's why sometimes you will experience it or witness it, and then other times it's okay. Let's go with that theory. Let's say a place is haunted. You got a ghost. He's there or she's there, whatever. They're there all the time, all the time. Let's let's go with the theory that they're tied to that place. They lived there for 50 years. They really like the place. They're there all the time. They might hang out somewhere here, there, but they're there 24/7. All right. Whether they're aware of you or they're carrying on like they did in life because they're on some hamster wheel of existence. Why is it that at certain times you will be able to hear or see or smell certain things and other times no? Is it that there's a overlap of our reality with that one, that all of a sudden you could hear certain things, and then that overlap then basically becomes separated? But the ghost is there all the time. Okay, they're there all the time. Why is it that it's only under certain circumstances that phenomena is seen or recorded or whatever, whatever the phenomena is, whether it's auditory, visual, which, like he said, he's absolutely right. Visual is the the least. And I have to laugh because a lot of psychics, when you speak to them, not all of them, most will tell you that even when they say, I saw this apparition, basically they're talking, I saw it in my mind's eye. Not all of them, very few, as a matter of fact, will actually see a actual visual of what they're seeing in their mind's eye. That doesn't mean they're wrong, but to actually physically see an apparition, that's not very common at all. At all. Um, and it's like, I think it's very exciting because, like I said, like what's going on over at Skinwalker Ranch and where he's doing and all these things, to me, it falls under the umbrella of the paranormal. And I know there's people going, but no, ufology, no. It's like, calm down. When I mean paranormal, I mean outside of the norm. Okay, outside of the normal. All right, and he made it. You know, all these phenomena. Let's say a Skinwalker Ranch, which originally was thought to be a UFO kind of. Even though the origins of our skinwalkers is, we're talking here an area that was basically traversed by witches, Native American witches, that even the tribes that were there were like, hey, stay out of there. All right. And then it became the site of UFO sightings. But then you throw in there these paranormal phenomena that people have experienced, that hitchhiker effect. So basically, you've got a mix there of everything. That's what I'm saying, for the people that, that want to say Bigfoot, UFO, paranormal, it's all different lanes. Nah, I don't think so. Now, how we're ever going to explain that, I don't know. But I do think that somewhere along, what is that from Ghostbusters? The streams cross. And And I think that there are other places like Skinwalker. It's just that for all we know, they might be in the middle of nowhere and nobody's lived there to observe, because once it got settled and people were living there and people were saying, hey, this happened or I saw this. But I think there's a lot of places out there that are Skinwalker like, um, that that probably have the same or more evident stuff going on there, whatever the case might be. It's an interesting world, interesting times that we live in. Believe me, very interesting times that we live in. So again, guys, I hope you like this interview with Alan. I urge you, like I said, to visit his site. And like he said, they're nonprofit, so you could make a donation to them, and it's tax deductible. Also, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter at mppellicer.com. You'll find a link there to the Substack. And again, if you want to listen to uh, any of the podcast versions of any of the stories of the supernatural story time, or Nightshade Diary, I have all, like I said, you can listen to it on the browser or download the MP3 file. And the only plus of that is there's no commercial interruptions. You're taking it off my site. I don't stop for commercial interruptions. So, but if you have your own podcast platforms, I have links there that will take you, and you can subscribe to any of the series that you want. And like I said, on the Substack, I shoot out articles about weird stuff. There's a lot of interesting stuff. If that's your bag, baby, I've got it. So please come back next week. I have a lot of interesting people coming up. Season 15. And before you know it, we will be in 2024. Can't wait, right? Again, you're all wonderful. Thanks for stopping by. Take care.